What up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Blacktop Podcast. The boys are back in town, baby. All three of us are here, and you might see we got the collar shirts on. You might ask, what are we celebrating? Well, if you were not paying attention last night, there's a senior team that won in 5 games. Nice little gentleman sweep, and for the first time in 2 years since 2019, where they were bested by the Raptors. The Golden State Warriors are heading back to the NBA Finals. And more than that, Wardell Stephen Curry has a Finals MVP finally. Albeit it's the conference finals, that's still kind of a Finals MVP. But, boys, how are we doing? I think all of us really, well, I'm going to say all of us had the Warriors picked for this. But I think the person I really want to hear from, considering they were like super duper riding for the Mavs during the beginning of the playoffs, is Ruben, brother. I think looking back at this first initial run that Luka's been on, where it was a deep playoff run, what were like the things you think are the major takeaways for you personally?
You're asking overall about Dallas, like what we saw from them this year
Yeah, well,
in the
mainly like
postseason.
the
Yeah,
postseason. Yeah,
man, you guys know from the very beginning of the postseason, I was like, Dallas is gonna make a run, and I just felt like Charles Barkley said it before when Luka was out in the first series that it was the best thing for that team because it gave the guys like Jalen Brunson, Spencer Dinwiddie, Maxi Kleber, all those guys confidence that they can perform at a high level without having Luka there. And then when you plug in your superstar back into the lineup, that gives you ultra confidence to go out there and perform. And we all know Luka's a big time performer. And I think with the reins completely handed over to him, there's no Porzingis there anymore. Where it felt like there was tension between the two of them, right, in terms of that duo and like how they would perform. Like now it's Luka has full reins. I felt like just the way they played, they completely invested in playing small ball. They decided to give Luka the ball, and then obviously defensively they were able to exploit a lot of what their matchups were, and that and I think Luka just showed that he's the guy, right? I think he just showed that like he's literally the he is that guy. He's literally that guy that can carry a
hundred
franchise
percent.
all alone. And like I said, I said this in the last podcast that we were on, or that I was on at least, is Luka's run this year and how well he was playing on a day-to-day basis reminded me so much of LeBron in 2007 when he took that team to the finals against San Antonio, and the second best player on that team was freaking Daniel Boobie Gibson. So, yeah, I gotta say I was so proud to see that. Jason Kidd coached a hell of a playoffs as well, like his matchups and his adjustments from game to game. I think everything worked out. They just at the end of the day they come up short because they don't have that back end talent. But besides Luca, but if you add in that second piece, they're right back there. I think.
100%. I think another dude who really showed out was Dorian Finney-Smith. I mean, he shot 40% from the 3-point line that entire playoff run. So you see that growth in that. I mean, he's similar to Robert Williams in that I think they're the most valuable players in regards to their contracts, because I believe he's on like $50 million for however long it was. But having a solid guy like that be able to knock down shots and be like one of your good defenders is a new super solid thing. And not only that, over the past couple of games, you saw how the fact that he was being respected from the 3-point line, that really opened up the rest of the floor for him, allowing him to get like, those fake and drive to the holes. And yeah, I think JJ Redick summed it up best, where, we all want to say, look how good Magic was and Larry Bird were in their first years, but obviously all of them are playing with Hall of Famers, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, Norm Nixon, those kind of guys. Luka's best player was arguably Dorian Finney-Smith or Jalen Brunson. So I think, considering how far they went, I think this is like, honestly, is way more significant and way more impactful than I think Trae Young's conference finals run was, just because one, it's in the West, and two, he never really, as much as Jalen Brunson was that dude in the first round, heading into the next two, you really saw how, he was solid in spurts, but there were a bunch of like stinker games, especially in that second round. But yeah, heading from there though, let's talk about a team that's not heading to Cancun. Christian, man. I believe you are a Warriors fan, even though we say you're the Celtics fan by default of loving Jason Tatum. But how are you feeling, brother?
Feeling pretty good. Yeah, I mean, for context, I've been a Warriors fan, I think, since 2011. Like, I think DJ remembers, but he used to come over like before school, and we would play 2K12, 2K11, and the Warriors would be like one of my favorite teams to use just because like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson were probably both 80 overalls at the time, but like they literally like they were the Splash Brothers in the game too, you know? And I think like that's how I really fell in love with the team, just playing 2K. And I followed them ever since. But yeah, I'd say I'm still both a Celtics and Warriors fan. I have a duality there. I feel pretty good about like the Warriors though. They're like obviously ultra dominant. It's kind of hard to say how to feel about them 100% right now. Obviously, they're the best team in the West, but I think the competition is really going to come from the teams they're going to, whatever team they're going to play in the East, right? I think both teams are a scary matchup for them. They kind of bring something that no other team that they played this season, I think, has showed. Like, I think if you think about how they match up with the Celtics, just quickly, like players like Jason Tatum are not like someone that they really have an answer for, more or less. Um, Marcus Smart is kind of like in many ways a stopper to like Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, whoever he was to mark. They have Jalen Brown, and they have like a much more solid front court than I would say the teams they played up against as well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see them in the playoffs, though. I think it says a lot about their legacy. I think it's really like very, like kind of how I mentioned on the last episode. I think it's very comparable to kind of the legacy of the like second three-peat run that the Bulls had, and who knows if it's really gonna escalate into that, but it has that energy or that esque to it. Um,
I like that. I like that. And the
yeah.
biggest thing heading into here is if the Boston Celtics do win, Otto Porter has the chance to avenge his 1964 loss to the Boston Celtics, aka Will Chamberlain. No, but considering that the Eastern Conference Finals is still kind of ongoing, even though I think I can speak for all of us, we're pretty confident that Boston's going to pull that out. But that's what next week's for. Since Ruben, you think Miami can do it in two? I mean, there's never been a team that I think is really dominating. Like both the teams have been clapped. You know, obviously right now recency bias points towards the Celtics, but I think just for the historical side of me, I want it to be the Celtics. But the way you're looking, Ruben, yeah, I see it going both ways. But for me personally, I think it's the Celtics. Do you want to give a quick little rebuttal to
I don't
that?
know. I'm just being an idiot because, like, you guys know already that I like to go against the grain. But I think if there's a team that can come back, I think it's Miami. I think they've answered really well against adversity this year. But I am pretty much like Boston is Boston's gonna win, right? They're gonna win in six, I think. But again, like I wouldn't bet past that Miami can push it to seven. But ultimately, I think Boston is the team that will take it. I think Boston and Golden State is the matchup, and just health overall too. It's been such a big story of the
Oh
series,
yeah,
right? Like Jimmy's playing at 70%, like Kyle Lowry's playing at 60%. They haven't had Tyler Hero hasn't played the last game. I mean, right? You're having key players in and out of the lineup, key players that aren't playing consistently and aren't playing healthy. So at the end of the day, it's just a battle of attrition at this point, right?
no doubt, no doubt. Heading from there though, let's talk about something else. So, if you're unaware, the All NBA teams have recently been announced. I think a few days ago, but we're just going to talk about that real quick before we get to the real good stuff at the end here. So, your All NBA first team is Luka Doncic, Devin Booker, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jason Tatum, and Nikola Jokic. Your All NBA second team: John Morant, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, DeMar DeRozan, and Joel Embiid. And finally, your All NBA third team: Chris Paul, Trae Young, LeBron James, Pascal Siakam, and Karl Anthony Towns. Now, I think there are kind of two main questions I have for like all of us is number one, how are we feeling about these teams? Like, if there's anybody you'd kind of flip flop with or like completely take out. And number two, which I think is like the big question, is Joel Embiid a snub slash is there something the league should do to have it where, there's two players in the same position that have such a dominating season that like they both need to be recognized, or I don't know. I don't want to like throw too much in that conversation yet, but I guess first off, do you all agree with the teams fully? Is there anybody you take in and out? I know we talked about it a little bit, but just so it's said on the pod, how y'all feeling?
Yeah, I don't. I think the team. I think the okay. So the 15 guys that were selected, I think, are correct. I think the 15 guys that we selected are correct. What I think is Devin Booker should not have been on the first team.
Yep.
It should have been Steph. Right. I think it should have been Steph. Him or John Morant would have been good for me. I don't even know if Luka. Like at first, my first team was Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, John Morant, Steph Curry. That was my first team. Second team, I would flip Kevin Durant for LeBron James. LeBron only played like two more games, but LeBron had an incredible season this year. Um, so yeah. Anyways, like I think yeah, I think they got the picks right. People are gonna argue also. I know we were talking about this. I'm not. I don't want to hear any arguments about Jimmy Butler over Pascal Siakam. Pascal had a much better season this year. So yeah. I think they got the. I got. I think they got the selections right. I don't know what you guys think.
No, 100%. I think everybody's just riding the Jimmy Butler train based off his playoff run. But if you look to his regular season performance, it's way down compared to what he's doing now. I mean, I think he averaged what 24 ish for the regular season. Now he's averaging 30. Obviously, if you look at that, you could think, how is this guy snubbed? But when you look at the actual numbers, you understand why. I definitely agree that Devin Booker is better suited for the second team. I think if you look at the jump John Morant took and how they're similar in that they're both the main guys, but the plus you get with John Morant is that he's better able to create for others, and but obviously with Devin Booker you get a bit more of the shooting. But I would have personally put definitely John Morant or Steph over Devin Booker. I just think obviously that main thing is probably the fact that the Suns were the best team in the West, but you know it is what it is. Chin, what you think?
No, yeah, I think I'm in complete. Uh, I just lost. I agree, 100%. Um, I think the one thing that's really standing out to me, I'm looking at like the chart in terms of votes. I think it's dope and just like beautiful to see that Giannis has a like 100% score of being a first team player. Um, I think he is definitely the best player in the NBA right now, without question. Like all in all, um, yeah, I think Devin Booker. It's hard to say because like you kind of look at this list and because it's based off votes, you don't actually know where those votes were kind of conjugated from and how they were actually accumulated, how they were thought of. Because you can kind of look at it from like different perspectives of like individual accolades and who did what and why they deserve to be there. Because if you look at players like LeBron, who's in the third team, I agree he could be interchangeable for the second team, but the Lakers weren't a good team, but LeBron had individually one of his best seasons ever. But Devin Booker, he had a good season by all means, but I think he's up there because he is the like best player on the number one seed team. So I think all NBA teams are hard to like talk about just because, um, yeah, the votes are just kind of spurred from it, like different opinions, different kind of ways you weigh the vote. Um, I think the first team besides Devin Booker, though, is completely correct. I think Steph Curry is up there for me. I don't think it's. I think John Morant will be there eventually. Um, but if I were to have my vote, I'd consider how they played without John Morant. Um, yeah.
No doubt. With that being said, obviously the big like kind of elephant in the room is the Joel Embiid thing. I guess first of all, do you guys think it's like a big snub or like number two? What would you do about that? I guess because
Yeah, it's a big snub, huge snub. But sorry, I'll let you finish your thought. I'll let you finish your point.
oh no, go ahead, you go ahead, and then I'll kind of rebuttal, I guess.
Yeah, he should have been first team. And I think the problem is like, all-star voting is front court, back court. So these awards are still using these old classic, old-fashioned, out-of-date positioning terms when it should have been changed a long time ago to front court, back court. The runner up for the MVP should never be a second team all-star. There's absolutely no reason that he should be. It doesn't matter who it is. There there is no reason why Giannis, Joel, and Nikola Jokic like why those three shouldn't have been first team, right? Even though like three of them play similarly the same positions, or you had two centers on there, right? Like three front court, two back court, keep it that way moving forward. Because at the end of the day, how you do it is just the 15 best players, in my honest opinion. Because if we continue to go by these stupid, old, out of date rules, we're gonna leave players out. Luckily, the 15 picks that were in there, it was pretty obvious for us, for the most part, in terms of like these 15 guys. I don't think anyone really has an argument with. But again, being in the second team, the first team, the third team, those have contractual obligations. Like those have contractual terms. Like if you make the first team, you make this amount. So Jason Tatum making first team actually him making first team, he's supermax eligible, right? If I think if it's regardless of what All NBA team he makes, right? But there are contractual things where it's like, okay, if you make the first team All NBA, right? This is the incentive that you get. If you make second team, that kind of thing. So again, it has an effect on contracts. It has an effect on legacy and reputation for a lot of these guys. There's no way in hell Joel Embiid should be second in MVP voting when it was one of the closest MVP races in such a long time. The closest I can think of is probably 2017, right, with Russ and James Harden. That's probably the
That was
closest
possible.
one that I can think of. Yeah, there's no way that a guy should be a runner up and then be in the second team All NBA when, quite frankly, you know, I love Jason Tatum and the run that he's put on as a player, but Jason Tatum was not better than Joel Embiid this year. As much as I love Jason Tatum and the way that he's played this year, like Joel Embiid was literally the second best player in the league this year in terms of like MVP voting. So I mean, I think that's the simple fix, and we've heard it all across like NBA media throughout this week when it was announced. So yeah, I think they got to get rid of those outdated rules of these positioning things and vote the results across the board, front court, back court, leave it that way. The game has changed, and so I think like the wording has to catch up at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
And I almost
100%.
think like at this point, because like they've already made that transition to like the All Stars and it's been front court, back court, like you mentioned, I don't see any reason why they couldn't even just like make it even less skewed. Like, no one's gonna be butthurt. Like this is a concept in my mind that's just been stirring, but like they could literally just name 1 through 15, put the top five guys in first team, put the top 5 to 10 guys in the second team, 10 to 15 in the third team. Like because truthfully, like you could argue that yeah, Devin Booker would probably fall to the second team most definitely. Like he kind of ends up there on circumstance. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I definitely agree. Like it's pretty ridiculous that Joel Embiid is not NBA first team, like in
Yeah.
this circumstance.
I want to add. I agree with your idea, Christian, where I think it should be just the 15 best players, right? Who do you pick for first five best players in the league? All NBA. Okay, Giannis, Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant. I think those are the five best guys. Those guys should be all NBA. Like, I don't think it should be skewed towards position even. Like, I agree with Christians where it's like, dude, name the five best players, the first team, the next five, second team, then the next five, third team. I think that's a simple fix so that, we're really rewarding who the five best players are in the league and then the next guys the subsequent guys after that.
I like that idea, but I think the only thing is, like, for the league, obviously you want to push like all the positions. You don't like obviously for a long time before this generation of having guards like Trey Young, Chris Paul, and Steph Curry be very effective. It was very much a big man's game, and I think the only flaw with having the 1 through 15 thing would be that not that it would happen, just because there's so many good players and throughout the entire league, but it just lends the possibility that 1 through 5 could be all one position. I think that's kind of the only flaw with that. I think the All-Star format is definitely what they should implement. I On top of that though, I think what needs to happen is, you know, the main thing with this is that obviously aside from legacy, at the end of the day, the contractual like incentive of making all-NBA teams something that's super on like the minds of everyone. Because I mean, I read, I think it's Devin Booker and Karl-Anthony Towns are the two guys who are like eligible for like the $200 million max extensions heading into this offseason or next offseason or whatever. But that's obviously a big thing. I think it was on Kevin Durant or JJ Redick's podcast where Jason Tatum was talking about how, you know, the fact that he got snubbed from an all-NBA team, he missed out on, what was it, like $35 million. I think the thing to fix that though, I think, is that every player, particularly like more so the wings, guys who could be mixed into that shooting guard small forward role. I think what needs to happen is at the beginning of the season, I think every player needs to submit, you know, if you're voting me for All-NBA, I want to be considered for the guard versus the front court, the backcourt versus front court thing. That way, you know, you get guys like Jason Tatum who, if you combined his votes from like that 1 year, he would have definitely been the All-NBA team. But the fact that he got split between guard and forward led to him getting snubbed. Same thing with Klay Thompson a few years ago. So I think, you know, the way to kind of alter that is number one, I think you go with 2 backcourt, 3 front court. And then number 2, if you're that guy who's kind of on the bubble, you got to kind of make your choice if you want to be looked at as more as a guard versus the forward. That way, you know, you get all of the votes possible that are like in your favor, I guess. That's my idea, at least.
Would you say like a util position?
That'd be cool.
That would be sick.
That would be,
right?
This is
2
fantasy.
front court, 2 backcourt, and util. Because it is fantasy, right? It's positionless league now.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Because let's say we had Luka and Steph, and let's say we had Joel and Nikola Jokic, and it was between let's say next season Scotty Barnes has a great jump. He plays point guard for the most of the year, but you know the guards are there. But he's been like one of the best players in the league. Scotty Barnes, you can put him in the util position. Bang. That solves a lot of problems because if let's say you do 2 backcourt and 2 front court, regardless, 2 front court guys can be the 2 backcourt guys, and then you can have a util because I think it's important not to say, oh, all of a sudden, like, why can't we have 3 guards? Like, why can't we have Ja Morant, Steph Curry, and Luka Doncic? Because all of them averaged 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists this year. And they were all, you know, huge if you look at win percentage and impact on the floor and all, you know, net rating and all that stuff. And they blow it out of the roof. Let's say just as an example. Why can't we have 3 guards instead of 2 front court? Or instead of 3 front court? Right? So I feel like that could also fix the positioning thing. Because I think in fantasy, right, like positionless league at this point, you know, like a team like Toronto, like you're looking at Dallas, you're looking at like Golden State, nobody's playing traditional centers nowadays. So just a thought, right? And you guys play fantasy, so you know the util is such a clutch position, bro.
I'm not gonna lie, I really like that idea. Cause I agree. There should be at times where you can have 3 guards versus 3 like front court players. Dang, yo, NBA man, hit us up. We'll fix your league. I like that though. No, I think that's it. That's it. Yeah. Solid. Chin, do you have any last little comments you want to make?
Nope. I think we pretty much solved it.
Ruben has fixed the NBA.
True, bro.
We all did, boys. We all did. We came collectively, our minds together.
100%. 100%.
There you go.
All right. So, heading from there, we got the real meat and potatoes, the whole main course of the pod right here, right now, baby. So, as we had mentioned before, we reside in Canada, particularly British Columbia, and even more particularly, Christian and I are from Surrey. Ruben is from Coquitlam? Yeah. But Obviously, the place most of you know that is Vancouver. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Obviously, from Canada, and if you are not aware, Team Canada has recently announced their summer core that have all guys that have committed for the next 3 years in the hopes of making that Olympic run that we fell a little bit short of last Olympics. I'm going to start this off by reading out the roster and then we'll just react from there. Nikhil Alexander Walker, RJ Barrett, Kem Birch, O'Shea Brissett, Dylan Brooks, Lou Dort, Zach Edey, Melvin Ejim, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Corey Joseph, Jamal Murray, Kevin Olynyk, Kevin Pangos, and finally the man who unfortunately just got eliminated, Dwight Powell. Now, first of all, there's definitely no reason for us to not say this, but this is by far the greatest roster I think Team Canada's ever been able to assemble. There's so much talent coming out. I mean, especially when you look at a place like Toronto, no doubt, I think Toronto's right there when it comes to being like on the heels of like say a California or a Texas, these powerhouse US states that are really producing great basketball players. And even then, you look at the roster and there's like two, I think, really big names that are missing, obviously, in Brandon Clark and Andrew Wiggins. I do believe, though, that when it comes to the final roster, though, when it comes to if they do end up making the Olympics, no doubt those guys will be on there. But yeah, what do y'all think? Ruben, I'm especially curious for you since you did cover U.S. basketball for a bit. So I think let's start with Christian and then we'll hover down to you, my brother. Christian, bro, what you think about this roster?
I think, yeah, I agree with your sentiment that this is probably, and to be completely fucking honest, I don't even know who was Canadian prior to these players. Um, just because obviously Team Canada has, I mean, I was reading up on it just a bit ago, but Team Canada hasn't made the Olympics since 2000 in Sydney. Me and DJ were born in that year, so for context, I really don't know who was on that team. That being said, though, like this team, I was mentioning to the guys, when we were talking about this when we first saw, I think this team could honestly compete with any international team, including the USA. I mean, given that, you know, depending on who Team USA has at any given moment, they're obviously going to be the best team in the world, just because they have that fine selection. But if you really look at this team, like this team is kind of built like a truck, like Lou Dort, RJ Barrett, and then they got like some of the best offensive players: Jamal Murray, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, um, Dwight Powell. No, yeah, I just think like this team is definitely could be designed, especially with Nick Nurse being the head coach. This team can be designed in a way that really reflects the Raptors, but more in a small ball sense, just because the Raptors obviously have the bigger players. I think you'd have to re-engineer it and rethink it with players like Lou Dort and Dylan Brooks, who are obviously smaller in the comparison of like OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, right? But I see no reason as to why, because these players are so defensively gifted, like the players that they do have committed, that they couldn't kind of be a well constructed machine. Because I think that's like the one thing Team USA personally lacks, like the fact that they lost so many games. Was it in the FIBA tournament? Like just because,
Oh,
or
like
well,
the friendlies. I think they lost to it was Australia. Was Australia one?
they lost to Australia for sure.
Australia and it was like a weird team, like not even like a Spain or Argentina. It was like oh no, it was France. Well, that was in the actual Olympics, but
I just remember them getting cooked by Patty Mills.
yeah.
But yeah, no, like that. I think that's the one thing they've always lacked is just like team cohesion. But I think this team, because it's a humble group too, like it's not full of like the biggest stars. I think this team could be like ultra competitive for sure.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I think the biggest X factor for, or not maybe biggest X factor, that's kind of a pun, but I think a guy like Zach Edey could really be like a big difference maker. He's like a true center. The fact that he's 7'4" and he's like 300 right now or something like that. Considering that international basketball plays with FIBA rules, this guy's gonna be looking like Rudy Gobert. I mean, he's gonna be allowed to camp the paint, and considering that not every team is rocking a team with like 6'5" plus guards and a lot of length, I think Zach Edey is a guy that, although he's definitely the youngest player on this roster, I think he'll definitely have a chance to make an impact. I think. Not only that, but the future talent that's coming up. I mean, if you look at this draft, you got Shaden Sharp, who's supposed to go in like the top 5. Benedict Mathurin out of Arizona, Leonard Miller, Andrew Nemhard, Caleb Houston. Like I said earlier, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say the talent coming out of Canada can really rival that of like a California, the southern states. Hey, it is a beautiful time to be Canadian, and it is a beautiful time for for Canada basketball. But yeah, Ruben, bro, I think considering that one, as I mentioned earlier, you've covered, Canada basketball. You've been there. It was for training camp, right? You were like kind of around there that time. Yeah, speak on this roster, man. Considering what you have something to compare it with.
Yeah, it's an exciting roster. It's probably the best talent that they've put together. We thought that about the last roster when they tried to qualify and they lost to the Czechs in
Yeah,
Victoria.
Thomas Satoransky was
That was tough.
cooking us.
He was cooking. He was cooking. And that's the thing about this team is the problem is number one, inexperience when it comes to Olympic basketball. When it comes to FIBA rules, a lot of these guys haven't played a lot of international basketball, so that's a huge. When you don't have the talent level like the U.S., your ability to adjust to a whole new game and to different rules and different standard set and all that stuff, it's going to take longer for you to adjust or um, yeah, for you to adjust to the gameplay, to the game style, because you can't sit back and settle in on, okay, we're the greatest players in the world like the US has. So that's what we saw in the last tournament, right? And I think Nick Nurse, even though he's played and he's coached so much international basketball, this is a whole new roster that hasn't formed a lot of chemistry, right? And a lot of these guys haven't played with each other. I mean, some of them played with an AAU together or in programs together in Canada and stuff like that, but this is the first time they're all together, right? And so that's the number one thing. But I think they'll have the opportunity for the next 3 years to obviously get set for the next Olympic qualifier, and I think they can do it with this roster. I'm really excited to see what Nick Nurse can do with a healthy Jamal Murray, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and I like the fact that they do have those bigs like Kelly Olynyk, Dwight Powell, a lot of guys that can stretch the floor. And they have a lot of really good defensive personnel that mirrors or reflects a lot of what Toronto has, right? So I think Nick Nurse will be able he'll be able to deploy a lot of the things that he was really successful with when it came to small ball this year. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that. The other thing to me that stands out is just some inside stuff. Kem Bridge just underwent arthroscopic surgery, so he won't be at the training camp this summer with the Canadian team. Chris Boucher has not committed because of contract obligations. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go with the list here. There's 3 guys off the top of my head right now, obviously. So Chris Boucher has not committed to the core because right now his contract is up in the air whether he comes back to Toronto. So right now he's not committing to the roster because he wants to get his contract with the NBA figured out. Brandon Clark, he hasn't been significantly involved with the program. And I'm not sure the reason why he hasn't really been involved with the program, but it would be nice if Brandon Clark was, because I think that he has a lot of really good elements that can provide a lot of we've seen what he has done for Memphis this season, right? And I think you miss that on a roster like this. And obviously Andrew Wiggins, who has had a really tumultuous back and forth with Team Canada. I think it took a lot for Nick Nurse to convince him to play in the last qualifier, and my understanding is it will do this. It will be about the same for this upcoming one. Also, I think Wiggins' commitment to Team Canada is fading a little bit just because of the last one as well. A lot of blame was put on him for Team Canada's inability to qualify for the Olympics. And so when you put that, he's kind of the face of Canadian basketball right now, just because of how far he's gotten, being a number 1 pick and all of that stuff. So that's a lot of pressure for him to live up to, and I don't know if he's been that. I don't know if he's ever been that guy to answer the call when he's been the number one guy. We saw that in Minnesota. I'm not questioning his character or anything like that, or his personality, but yeah, I'm sure you guys understand where I'm coming from in the sense that I don't know if that's something that he wants to step into again, considering everything that's going on. And I think Team Canada as is really good. Um, but yeah, I mean, this roster is really exciting to see in comparison, obviously, to the past ones. This is the most talented one, as I mentioned before. I'm really excited to see a backcourt of Shea and Jamal Murray. I think that's going to be super dynamic. And then I'm actually really interested to see how well Lou Dort is going to be with this roster because he played really well in the last Olympic qualifier, and he's a guy that Nick Nurse absolutely loves. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's that starting power forward at the first day of the first game of the qualifier, or if they play in the FIBA. Yeah. So I really love this roster. There's nothing more that I can say about it other than um, we have to see them gel pretty quickly. But it's great that they committed within these 3 years because now they'll have that time together every summer in the off season to work together, um, barring injuries and stuff too, right? Like. Ken Birch just had surgery on his knee, so we'll see, how that plays out. Um, yeah, man, I don't know about you guys, but this is an exciting team. Like, I think this is probably the best on paper roster that we've had. Probably, no, sorry. The best on paper roster there is when it comes to any Olympic, like any country eligible for the Olympics. I think, in my opinion. I mean, there's the U.S., there's probably France now with Rudy Gobert and Joel Embiid just also.
Oh, he's trying to be French. I remember hearing about that.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's trying to play for the French team. So that's a dirty team if you get Rudy Gobert and Joel Embiid in the front court. But in terms of overall talent, you're looking at the roster and the depth of Team Canada. I really like what they have from top to bottom. Um, I'm so glad that O'Shea Brissett also committed because man, that he's such a really he's a great piece for them. I mean, you can go down the list. Like if we were to go down it, like there's not a single name on here where you'd be like, I don't know about this guy. Like, I think they're all really good players in the league. Jamal Murray and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander obviously lead that roster with RJ Barrett obviously coming up as well. And then they have the veteran experience in Kelly Olynyk and Corey Joseph. So yeah, no other words for me to say other than I'm super excited, right? Like I've covered Team Canada where, I got to see these guys play up close, and I've had the chance to talk to Jay Triano and Rowan Barrett and RJ and all these guys. I've had the opportunity to talk to these guys, and they're super excited about the future of Team Canada. And that was years ago. And that was back in I want to say 2018, but it was those guys were really excited, and they sound super committed to the program. So I think. Having them commit this early on, is a huge testament to how far this program has come in comparison to the last few years.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, the one word that really jumps out when you look at this roster, I think it's just versatility. I mean, we've said that a lot, but when you look at this roster, there's literally, I don't want to say there are no holes, but low key, there aren't that many holes, especially when you compare it to other international teams. When you look at I'm just looking at the international, like a Slovenia. Obviously, how that offense is going to run. You know how that team's going to go. But speaking of other countries, when we look at where they're at right now, I looked this up earlier today. Canada is ranked 18th in the world. And the teams that are above us are Venezuela, Turkey, Russia. I don't know if they're going to be allowed to compete in international play, but Brazil, Poland, Czech Republic, Germany, Italy, Greece, Lithuania, Argentina, Serbia, Slovenia, France, Australia, Spain, and the US of A. Now, obviously, as we just talked about earlier, this roster is going to be together for at least the next 3 years. And looking at those next 3 years, it's quite the climb, but I mean, we'll keep saying it. This roster is built for that climb, and hopefully when it comes to, I believe the next Olympics are in Seoul. Yeah, but hopefully when it does come to that, number one, Canada is in there, and number two, they are definitely contending for a medal. There's no doubt in my mind that if this team does gel together as much as they possibly can, especially with a guy like Nick Nurse at the helm, and again, kind of I think having that more so rounded. I don't really want to use the word humble because no doubt that the U.S. players are still humble, but you know what I mean. It's just they're not going into there as the bullies versus the U.S. where you know anything else would be a failure. I think this team has a big chance to not only get like band together, but I think to get the whole country behind it, and it's going to be exciting. Now, if you are not aware, everybody, they are slated to play the Dominican Republic, I believe, on Canada Day. And after that, they have a couple more exhibitions with the U.S. Virgin Islands and the Bahamas. I believe that's their group for qualifying for the FIBA World Cup, which is in the Philippines. So it's going to be an exciting, number one, an exciting summer. Number two, in the next exciting few years, in the hopes that they are able to make it. But I guess to just kind of end it off, do y'all have any like last little thoughts you want to get out or anything like that?
Golden State wins a championship.
I don't know how to feel about that. I want to agree, but I want to think that okay, I just think there's like definitely two different timelines that are going to happen. I think Jason Tatum either becomes that guy this season or the Golden State saga continues. It's one or the other. I'm not saying the Celtics are just Jason Tatum, but literally I think this is like the beginning of his like his GOAT saga
Yeah,
or his
there isn't like one team you're fully rooting for to win. Like both teams, I think have narratives that shape really well because obviously Golden State, not being able to play in the playoffs for the last 2 years when arguably you would have been in contention if everybody was healthy. And obviously the Celtics are not only the new kids on the block, but the new kids that are carrying on those saga of arguably one of the greatest teams in sports, like not even just basketball, but in the entirety of sports. So that being said,
yeah.
we don't want to get y'all a little too excited for that because we don't even know if they're playing Boston yet. Obviously, Draymond was saying earlier, like, oh, we're going to play Boston. We're hoping for or whatever. But coming to y'all, maybe next Tuesday, maybe next Thursday, who knows. But the next episode will obviously be talking about the NBA Finals. We're at the precipice of the NBA season. We're right on the edge of talk about free agency and all that stuff, which is number one sad, but number two, great to hear because that means another team is going to be able to host up that trophy. Only thing I'm hoping for is just some close games, though. That's all I want. That's the one thing. But
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh no. I think the real problem is that like the teams that are competing right now are all like hot streak teams. Like obviously that happens in NBA naturally, but the type of teams that are constructed in the like Western and Eastern Conference Finals are literally, I think maybe minus the Heat, but like literally the Mavs, the Warriors, and the Celtics. Those are all teams that like when like in the zone like will just like give you a 40-point quarter, a 30-point quarter, and it's like there hasn't really been like defense or like just like locking down, like
100%.
even though like the two best defensive teams are playing each other in the Eastern Conference Finals and that's been a closer series, like it's literally been like, oh, it, the the Celtics are like 30-16 on in the third quarter and it's like the game's over. So it's hard to say. I don't know. That's what I've noticed at least, though.
Yeah, I think with that, I think this is the double-edged sword when it comes to the fact that so many teams live and die with the three. It's that drive and kick shit. I think it's made offenses so like stagnant to where like back in the day you had multiple players who were able to get their own shots off. Now you're like we're talking about other teams who might only have two. And I think that's
Toronto.
Toronto.
It's Pascal Siakam and Gary Trent. That's it.
Not gonna lie, that's how the Bucks were looking, and even then, Drew Holiday wasn't really on shit. But I also saying I don't get why people are calling for them to trade him. That's insane. But with that being said, This has been another episode of the Blacktop Podcast. I have been DJ. On my left here is Christian. On the bottom there is Ruben. And we appreciate y'all getting down with us. We hope to see y'all soon. And stay safe, stay blessed. We'll see y'all again soon.